Welcome to a new year and another episode of Home Visit with Tyler Siskey and the Associates. We're riding solo today. I don't think, Raquel, that I can make an announcement today, but we're riding solo today. Our good friend DJ Elliott is out of pocket. Hopefully next week we'll have an official announcement to make, but he's out of pocket today. I want to say Happy New Year to everyone. I hope everybody got some good family time, which we did. As a family, got to spend a lot of time with the kiddos and then over the last couple of weeks, and hope everybody enjoyed the bowl games. It was a ton of fun. And by the way, I do want to tell everybody, we went on a little family vacation to Gatlinburg this past week. Extremely underrated. Like if you are in the Southeast and need a family getaway, I highly encourage Gatlinburg, and we are in Dollywood. So we stayed at the Dollywood Resort and went to Dollywood. It's a little bit better than Six Flags. Almost, it's just a little step, I think, under Disney World. Had a ton of stuff for the kids. I was really surprised. I showed up, thought I was going to, pitch a couple balls and try to win some stuffed animals or something, ride a roller coaster too. They had like 10 or 11 roller coasters. I mean, it was crazy, and some good ones in a lot of shows. So very impressed with Dollywood. So if you are looking for a family getaway, I highly encourage it. Did a little snow tubing and on the fake snow. And it was 70 degrees yesterday when we left, and coming back home, drove through a front, woke up this morning, 27 degrees, snow on the ground. And then they had several inches of snow in Gatlinburg after we left. So I'm glad we got out of there while we could. So I want to start this thing off and talk a little bit about the bowl season and COVID. When we left, this thing, 2 weeks ago, nobody was even really talking about how COVID was going to affect the game. And then we had this Omicron, which is the latest of a letter that we get. I can't wait to see what's next, the next variant we get to deal with. But we had 5 games canceled because of COVID. And look, we're all getting it. It's highly contagious. We're all going to get it probably at some point in time. I mean, we got to move on. I mean, it's been 2 years. It's time to go. I think everybody's tired of it. I'm tired of it. You're tired of it. We just need to move on as a society and life. But I found that the two that bothered me probably the most were Hawaii and UCLA. Hawaii going the day before Memphis flies out there to Hawaii, which is not an easy trip. And then you're 24 hours from kickoff and you get told that you're not playing, and then you look at NC State and Dave Doran went nuts and I loved it. I got to get Dave Doran on this show. That's what I'm going to do. My mission in this offseason, I'm going to get Dave Doran on this show. Him and I, it seems like we could get along. We have a lot of same thought processes when it comes to how things work. So I got to get him on the show, but they're like 5 hours from kickoff or something crazy, and they find out that UCLA is out. And look, we'll never know. And I think there's media reports, but look, some of these reports are just people trying to get clicks, and the media has never been. And some are great. That's the thing that's hard with the media. Some people tell you the truth and are honest, and some people are just trying to get clickbait. So you really never know how bad it was, but I think some people opted out of or, canceled the bowl games probably because of serious issues as far as they had a bunch of people that were sick. And I get that. But I also think, and there's no way to prove it, but I do think there are some cases where there were some people kind of using it as a get out of jail free card because you can't question it. You can't say you can't question when in today's society, you'll get buried if you say, oh, you're just trying to back out of the game. You'll get you don't think people would do that, but I think it may have occurred in some cases. I can't prove it, and I don't think anybody can, but it's kind of, it's amazing that the college football playoff teams, they didn't have any issues with it. I think when people wanted to play, they found a way to play, and that's just in my opinion. And I think, even the CDC knocking the quarantine days down to 5, I think even the government's getting tired of it, I think. So, I think that's going to help do that. And while we're on this, big kudos to the NFL. Big kudos. And they became, I guess this past week, became the first sports organization. They had a player test positive after the last game and actually played in the next game. So they didn't miss a game. Now, it hurt them a little bit. Well, that was Carson Wentz, the quarterback for the Colts. They ended up losing a big game yesterday to the Raiders. But Good for them. They moved on. I think the NFL saw it was getting close to playoff time, and they were, saw what really happened. The Cleveland Browns season really has struggled because of that at the wrong time with key players. But they saw kind of how it was affecting the league, especially in playoff time and getting close to the playoffs. And I think they just said, "The hell with it. We're going to 5 days, and we're going from there." So good for those guys on that. And I think that's, you treat it, that's the same way it's treated with the flu, which is, college football and sports teams have been dealing with forever. Because at the end of the day, they're the most in shape people. If there's no issues, let them go. I mean, it is what it is. And we know this disease now affects people in different ways. So let's talk a little bit about the coaching carousel. I think for the most part, I think the head coaching carousel, I think you may or may not have a coach go to the NFL from college. I think the Urban Meyer thing probably put a little halt to that a little bit. But the one I want to talk about that's very interesting to me, and it's a very interesting situation, is UCLA. For the fans out there that don't know, Chip Kelly's buyout goes to $0 on both sides. Okay. That's if he wants to leave and take another job, or if UCLA wants to move on January the 16th. Okay. So as we're talking to you on Monday, today's the 3rd. So you're about 2 weeks away, a little less than 2 weeks away. By the time you listen to this, about 10 days away from figuring out, what's going to happen. And does UCLA move on or does Chip Kelly move on? Because here's the truth, right? So at the end of the day, he's working on a 1-year contract. Okay, you can't work if you're. Let's look at it both sides. Okay, let's look at it let's start with UCLA side. All right, so if I'm at UCLA and I'm in the administration at UCLA, and the buyout goes to 0 on January 16th, okay, and my head coach is working on a 1-year contract. All right, your initial fear to make the move is, well, if we make a move this late before signing day, it's going to kill recruiting. You're already killing recruiting, okay, because a coach that's working on a 1-year contract is going to get slaughtered in recruiting for the whole next year, okay, and probably for 2 classes, okay, and especially at that level. And you're out there on the West Coast, and you've been, and you're a big-time program on the West Coast, and arguably, for years you were probably second in the Pac-12 or going to recruit, and then Washington comes in, and then Oregon comes in, and so you're at 4th, and then all of a sudden now you got Utah that's hot. You got Arizona State that's hot. For different reasons, but you're starting to slide down the pecking order of the Pac-12. If you go into next season with your head coach on a 1-year contract, you're not signing anybody. You're not getting anybody. And the same thing, now you look at Chip Kelly from his standpoint. He doesn't want to coach under a 1-year window because he knows that he's not going to be able to get the talent that he needs to win, and it's going to make his job that much more difficult by doing the job that he's supposed to do. And when you're on a 1-year deal, and everybody's going to, use that against him. And if you think now for years, the Pac-12 and West Coast recruiting was not what I call as aggressive as it is in the Southeastern Conference or even this side. You deal with so much negative recruiting and just dog eat dog world in recruiting in the SEC and the ACC and down in the Southeast because it's so competitive over recruits. Well, on the West Coast, things are a little bit laid back. There's not as many schools to choose from, premier schools, and you kind of can go get who you want. There's plenty of players. It's just not as dog eat dog world. And then all of a sudden, this guy named Mario Cristobal showed up into Eugene. And Mario comes from a dog eat dog world in recruiting as a big time recruiter. And he goes out and gets very aggressive. What makes everybody else step up their game? Okay, but Mario got all the players on the left coast, as I like to call it. Okay, well now you got Dan Lanning coming into Oregon, who's the same way. Okay, and then you got Lincoln Riley coming into USC in your town. Okay, they just made him the highest paid coach in the NCAA in your town. You're going to be going after the same kids, and they just made him basically. He's going to be there for a while, for a long while. And you're sitting here going into the season with a coach on a 1-year contract. That's not going to be good. So there's got to be a decision made on one way or the other. Either one, they need to pay him, and that's the big issue. Is like, do you pay the guy after 8-4 season? He's struggled a little bit coming in, hasn't met up to their expectations. Went 8-4 this year. Do you pay the guy after that? But there has to be some kind of stability decision made one way or the other. They either A, need to keep him and pay him and get him to a longer term deal, or B, move on. But by not the only decision that's wrong is to not do anything. Okay, they can either go ahead and move on now, rip the Band-Aid off, and let's go hire a coach, or they extend him. But they need to do one or the other. They don't need to go into a one-year deal because it's going to continue to hurt recruiting as time goes on. So that's something I would keep a really close eye on in the next couple of weeks. With the carousel, the assistant coaching carousel is about to crank up and start now that bowl games are ending. I think you're going to see a lot of coaches, which I know a bunch that aren't reported, obviously. You're going to see a lot of coaches come and go to different places. And the big thing that I'm interested with the assistant coaching carousel this year is how many of the players follow their coaches to new stops. That's something that I'm interested with the portal the way it is. So let's say that the DB coach here goes to another school. Does he take his young players with him? So I'm interested to see how that goes with the assistant coaching carousel. And I'm also interested in with these head coaching moves like a Lincoln Riley, like how many, now that the bowl game's over with, how many kids actually go to USC from Oklahoma or how many stay. So very interested to see how that works out. We're going to move on and talk about something else that was a pretty hot topic all over social media last week or so, and that's opt-outs in bowl games. We brought this up with DJ, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't remember now, about, Christian McCaffrey kind of started all this stuff when he was at Stanford, and it was just, unheard of up until that point of players opting out of bowl games. And what you saw is the way when the bowls went to, coming to BCS, really when the BCS came around, everybody started, there was this big transition to where, there was only really one game that mattered. Okay. And then the playoff comes around, there's two games that matter. And so, back when the BCS was, before the BCS, you would have a lot of times one didn't play two. So you may have 1 versus 4, 1 versus 5, 1 versus 6, 2 versus whatever. And there were several bowl games that mattered. And the next thing is like, it is what it is, but kids have changed, when and it's changed quickly. And you saw it in coaching, you don't, it's old school ways versus new school ways. And I think that, I was very fortunate. I kind of bridged the gap and I grew up in the old school way and then kind of ended it in the new school way. But, kids have changed, people have changed, and the whole aspect of doing it for school pride, that's kind of gone away. And it's all about, it's almost a sense of entitlement, I guess I'd say a little bit on some aspects of that, or now the kids want to know, what can you do for me? It's not what they can do for the school. It's what can the school do for me? And is there wrong with that? I mean, it doesn't matter if it's wrong or not, because that's the way it is. And that's just the way kids are raised now. And it's just, that's the problem that we have out there. All right. But when kids opt out of bowl games, here's my opinion. I can solve this real quick. There's no debate on my end. It's up to the kid. Okay. Does the kid want to play? Let him play. If he doesn't want to play, don't put him out there. There's no sense in fussing about it because there's nothing you can do about it. If I'm a coach, and this is one thing that, Nick Saban harped on, control what you can control. So if I'm a coach and I got a player that wants to opt out, I may talk to him about it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And it will blow your mind as a coach. And a lot of you guys listening have probably been through this. When it comes to the NFL and money, okay, you can be as close as you want to be with a kid. But when it comes to the NFL and money, they will not listen to you for 1 second. Okay, so they're going to make their decisions. They got people that will come into their life, whether they're agents or street agents or whoever, that will be in their ear, that they will listen to more than they're going to listen to you. Okay, I've had it happen to me personally. It blew my mind. It still does, but because I'm not getting paid $1 out of this. And all of a sudden that, people start getting in their ear and giving them bad information. But when it comes to, some players do need to play. Okay, so let's take an example like Bailey Zappi at Western Kentucky. Okay, Bailey Zappi's at Western Kentucky. He needs that extra film. He needs to be on the stage to show people that he can play. When you're at a group of 5 school and you're going to play the big boys, if you're at Houston and you're going to play Auburn in the bowl game, guess what? When a scout comes to watch you, guess what the first game he's going to turn on is? He's going to turn on the Auburn game because he wants to see you against SEC talent. That's what they always do. When we were at Arkansas State and we were playing, we play Virginia Tech or we play whoever, that's the games that the scouts want to watch because they want to see you compete against higher talent. Okay, which is also why I think the portal is going to be nuts. Okay, if you're really a prospect at a group of 5 school going to a bigger school because people are going to get in your ear about it. All right, but they need the film, so they're going to play. But when you're if you're at an SEC school, okay, and you've played an SEC schedule, you've played 12 games, and 10 of those 12 games are against big time opponents. You really don't need the film. One game's not going to change anything. So if you're a big time NFL prospect and you want to opt out, opt out. Do I like it? No, I don't. I wish they'd all play. I think it makes for an inferior product, okay, for the betterment of the game. But is anything I'm going to say or you're going to say or anybody else going to say make a difference? No. So don't worry about things you can't control, okay? And so if college football wants to make a better product, they'll create an environment where there are fewer opt-outs, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But the last thing is when a player opts out, it's not always bad. And I want to say that too, from a coach's standpoint, it's not always bad. So let's take Ohio State, for example. They had their 2 best receivers opt out. Well, guess what they got to do? They got to play these young guys that are talented, okay? And you kind of get, not only do you get extra practices, because in coaching, you'll learn this, okay? And coaches know this, they're listening, but fans need to know this. You can recruit a really talented kid, okay? But if he's not playing during the season, he's not really locked in, especially if he's on scout team or even if he's not on scout team. But if he's in your position meetings, he's not really locked into the game because he knows he's not going to play on Saturday. But all of a sudden, you got to put that kid, he knows he's got to play, okay? He's going to be a little bit more locked in. He's going to get a little bit better effort in practice. He's going to know that he's in the mix, and he's going to do better because he's invested because he knows he's about to play. And so I think sometimes when you do have a ton of opt-outs, it does help you prepare and get and see really what you got and helps the development of younger players because you got basically 15 practices plus a game against good competition to see kind of what, kind of get an evaluation. The other thing now with the portal is let's take Luke Altmaier, for example, and then Lane Kiffin's got to answer this question. It doesn't matter for me or a fan or anybody. If you're an Ole Miss fan, which we know we have a ton listening, it doesn't matter. But Lane Kiffin basically got 3.5 quarters to figure out, does he need to go get a quarterback or not? He got 3.5 quarters of live evaluation with Luke Altmaier versus a really good defense, okay? And he got to see, is this the guy that I can build and move on with or not? But there's no way you can practice all you want to. But until live bullets fire, you don't really know what you have, especially at that position, okay? But I think it's not always a bad thing. So now the only bad thing is when you play a game and you're down a bunch of people and it doesn't go the way you want it to go, the fans are on you and it kind of heats up your seat a little bit and you got to deal with it the entire offseason about how poorly you performed in the bowl game. And you kind of lose, that part of it. But, nobody remembers a year from now. Nobody remembers. So that's the deal with opt-outs. Now let's talk about how it can be fixed. How can we make this college product better? Okay, I had a long drive, Raquel, yesterday, so I had a lot of time to think about this. Okay, we talked about it a little bit better, but expanding the playoffs. Okay, so now instead of going from 4 teams that are Alabama didn't have any opt-outs, Georgia didn't have any opt-outs, Michigan didn't have any, Cincinnati didn't have any because they were playing for something. So let's make the product better on the field. And let's expand this thing to 16 games, not 12, 16 teams, not 12, 16, okay, because it's the same amount of the games. It's 4 additional games, okay? And by doing that, and here's the way, let's talk about player safety. Okay, well, let's talk about player safety. Everybody talks about the reason that they, the 15 games, which you just talked about, but the player safety part is if you move it back to 11 games, okay, then give every other team, you have an additional bye week. Okay, so you can spread out the bye weeks to give guys a week off because when it comes to injuries and things like that, a bye week, man, is like that's what you need is you need rest. Okay, and so I think that would help safety taking a extra bye week, and then you go to the 16-team playoff, and like we talked about, okay, to get a better product, okay? So on championship week, you have 10 championship games, okay, and your 10 winners get in. Okay, so everybody from the Mountain West to the Sun Belt to the SEC, ACC, if you win your league, you get in the playoff. And then you have 6 teams that are picked by the committee, same committee you've already had, so everybody still has their prestige and all that stuff. You have now, instead of picking 4 teams, they pick 6. Okay, you pick a top 6 teams as an at-large deal, and you have a 16-team playoff, which, by the way, FCS or 1AA or whatever you want to, that's what they started with. 100 years ago, they had a 16-team playoff. Okay, now it's moved to 2024, whatever it is now, but you started with 16 teams. Now, every single team that plays FBS football, 130, and there's adding teams and all that stuff, because we know Jacksonville State's coming in. We know James Madison, those Sam Houston, those schools are coming in. Every team to the start of the year has a chance to make the playoff. Now, let's say this. Let's say my man Rich Rod comes into Conference USA and he goes and he wins the league and he gets in the playoff. How do you think that's going to help him in recruiting? He's going to be able to go get good players, better than he's normally been able to get. So now you have a better product because you're able to go recruit on a national stage, even though you don't have the budget and even though you don't have the prestige that all these other schools have. When you're making the playoff every single year, like look what's happened to Cincinnati. Look what's happened to Central Florida. Look what happened to Boise. When they started making these premier games and started getting national attention, they were able to recruit better. And they were able to put a better product consistently on the field. So if you got a team that starts, you get down like in the Sun Belt, you get a ULL with Billy is there. If he starts winning championships or App State or whoever it is, you're able to compete on a national stage. You're going to be able to recruit better players. And so the whole product gets better that way. 2 is now on these Tuesday night Mactions and Fun Belt games, all of a sudden they become a little bit more interesting for TV ratings because that game actually means something in the big national picture. You're going to have more attention and more money dumped into college football from an advertising standpoint. Now, when we talk about the games, and we were talking about this earlier, but when you look at these bowl games, very few of them sell out. Okay, which ones sell out? The college football playoff sells out, and the Rose Bowl, the normal ones. But, the Gator Bowl and all that stuff, they don't sell out all the time. Now, on occasion, they will. If they have a team that hasn't been in a bowl game for a while or a team that travels well, if they get lucky with the matchup they get, like Central Florida and Florida playing in that bowl game in Orlando was a dream come true. Okay? Auburn playing in the Birmingham Bowl was a dream come true for the Birmingham Bowl because they're getting those fans and able to sell tickets. That doesn't happen often. Okay? When you get Vanderbilt versus East Carolina, the Birmingham Bowl is not selling out. So what you do is that first round, you can do 1 or 2 things. One, you can play it on the home site, which I think is a good idea if you want to make money for the schools. But if you're trying to if this is about saving the bowl games, then you just make the first round the next 8 bowl games. So take about this: you got the Citrus, the Outback, the Vegas Bowl, Holiday Bowl, Sun Bowl, Gator Bowl, Alamo Bowl, and the Houston Bowl, whoever. And that's your first round games. Now, you don't think those bowl games would love to have a first round college football playoff as their bowl game? You damn right they would. Okay, that way everybody gets a bowl experience. But 2 is they're going to sell out the game, which is where they make their money. They're going to get better advertisers because that's where they make their money. So their revenue in the bowl games is going to go up on 8 bowl games that don't get it. Now, once you get past the first round, your second round, I guess you call it the quarterfinals and semifinals, you go to the New Year's 6 games like you've been doing forever. And you rotate the 2 for the semifinals, just like you're doing now. You don't have to change anything. So you got the peach, the cotton, the orange, the sugar, okay? Who else is the other one? I don't know. But you got those 6 games that they rotate, okay? And then that's your semis and your quarterfinal games. And then the championship game, just like it is now, it's on a rotation. So you don't have to change very many things to do this. And you increase the quality of the product. And when you have 16 teams that are in bowl games, guess what? You have less opt-outs. Okay? And so your product's better and you don't have to deal with all this mess. Okay? And here's the last part we talked about a couple weeks ago too that I think that's important. Now let's talk about, you just took 8 bowl games away, right? Well, now you don't have to, 6 and 6 is not good enough anymore. So now your lower bowl games, instead of having 6-6 versus 6-6, you may have 8-4 or 9-3 versus 9-3 in some lower tier bowl games. Well, now the Birmingham Bowl, or this bowl game they made up in Texas just to get people in. Well, now they're getting a better game and able to sell more tickets. They're able to sell more advertising because they have a higher quality opponent, higher quality games. So I think, in my opinion, that's the way to fix it. Will they listen? Probably not. But I think that's a very easy way to fix this thing. And the 12 game playoff doesn't do anything but give people bye weeks. It's still the same amount of games. If Alabama's a 5 seed and they're still going to play 4 games, okay, it just makes the 1st through 4 seed only have to play 3. Okay, so I think the reward is if the better you do in the seeding, then you get to play a weaker opponent in round 1. But let's bump it up to 16 teams and let's go play. All right, since we left you last time, we've had all the bowl games except for the big one, and I guess LSU and Kansas State's playing on Tuesday. But after you listen to this on Wednesday, they would have already played. But most of the bowl games have been played, and I love the media's version of the SEC's really struggling, and the SEC this and that, and because they started off like 0-4 or whatever, 0-5, I don't remember what it was, but all that talk stopped after New Year's Eve. And, the reason, like we talked about, is SEC probably had the most opt-outs, and they didn't really a ton of like 6-6, 7-5 SEC teams. But you saw the teams that really played really well in the bowl games from the SEC standpoint. Is you saw South Carolina play well, a team that's up and coming, that was excited to be there, hadn't been there in a while. They came out and really played really well. I thought Tennessee played well. They played, and Purdue played well. That was a great game, probably one of the best bowl games of the season was the Tennessee-Purdue game. I hope everybody got a chance to see that in the Music City Bowl. But Tennessee was excited to be there. That was a great, phenomenal game. It was a very controversial ending. If that wasn't a touchdown, I don't know what is. I can't believe they reviewed it and still said it wasn't a touchdown. It was embarrassing because you could hear the whistle in the replay, and he was not down, and he was already crossed it when they marked him down. Very bad call, but, everybody makes mistakes. That one probably bothered me the most because I can see the official making a mistake, but when you review it, you shouldn't make the mistake. That was an easy call. It cost Tennessee the ball game, but a very well played game on both sides of the ball, very entertaining. And then you look at teams that didn't want to be there. I think Auburn had, you're playing with Finley instead of Bo Nix. He's already decided he's going to Oregon. Roger McCreary's out. They had a ton of players opt out. And then Houston's got something to prove, right? A group of 5 school, they come there, were excited to be there. They win the game. And it was a struggle. That was my first sign, by the way, that Cincinnati was going to struggle against Alabama. That was my first sign because Auburn played terrible. Auburn didn't want to be there. The only people that wanted to be at that game were the Auburn fans. They looked excited to be there, but the players didn't. And Houston played about as good as they can play and had to get with it to win. I thought it was that was probably my first sign. But let's get to me the best bowl game besides the Tennessee Purdue game was definitely the Utah Ohio State. If you did not watch the Rose Bowl, then you missed out on life. That was a great game. Ohio State had the receivers opt out. They had 7-8 starters out. And they looked shell shocked. The first Utah had like 80% of the fans there were Utah fans. They came out all fired up, jumped up, scored 35 points in the first half, and then Ohio State got it fixed at halftime and came out, and then it was just the opposite in the second half. And there was literally no defense at all. It was like watching my kids play a video game. I've never. Some of it was lack of effort. I saw people not really trying. It was crazy. As soon as the quarterback went out for Utah, they had a walk-on freshman playing quarterback at Utah, and he comes in. He threw a touchdown pass, but was just struggling. I was really surprised that Utah didn't go for 2 at least at the last score to try to do something. But Ohio State came down, kicked the field goal, win the game. But just a really entertaining game on that aspect. But probably the best bowl game to really watch of the big bowl games was definitely Utah Ohio State. All right, the next one we'll talk about is Sugar Bowl with Ole Miss and Baylor. Matt Corral getting hurt kind of dominated the storylines. A lot of people, that's when all the opting in, opting out, should he have played, should he not have played, everybody on Twitter had an opinion. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. The only person's opinion that matters is Matt Corral's. Okay, he wanted to play. He's a competitor. I know the kid. Okay, there was a 0.0% chance he wasn't playing that game. Okay, because that's who he is. He's a competitor. He wants to play. If you lined up right now, okay, if right now Dave Aranda and Lane Kiffin got together and said, "Hey, look, we want to meet. Let's meet in a parking lot, okay, in Vicksburg, Mississippi, in the Walmart parking lot and play again," Matt Corral would play. Okay, he loves the game. He's a competitor. He would play. That's who he is. And you got to understand this too, guys. It's like, you can't go into a game, and I believe this. You can't go into a game worrying about getting hurt. And Matt Corral was not. If you try to play the game of football, it's a violent game. Always has been, always will be. They can change all the rules they want to about targeting. They can change all the rules they want to about, hits on the quarterback below the waist. It's a violent game. It's a dangerous game. And everybody that ever puts the helmet on understands that. And guess what? You still play because you love the game. And that's who he is. He loves the game. He's going to play. So some guy on Twitter who has a blue check mark that wants to come out and say that he shouldn't have played and this is why he shouldn't play and all the media, nobody gives a shit what you think, okay? Because it's what the player wants to do. And, if Matt came out and said he didn't want to play, who cares that he didn't want to play? You're not going to go out and force the guy to play. You want somebody that doesn't want to play playing quarterback? No. You don't want anybody worrying about getting hurt. He wanted to compete. He wanted his legacy to go down, and that's what he did. Good for him. Good for him, because that's who he is. And I don't want to. I think that discussion needs to be over with. Okay, but did he get hurt? Yes, and I've heard, and I haven't talked to Matt, so I don't know, but X-rays were negative. I think Lane Kiffin said that in his press conference. But regardless of what happened, it's not going to affect his draft status. Okay, he'll be fine. He'll be ready to go for pro day and for the combine and all that stuff. It's not going to affect his draft status. And it may even help him because he went out and played. If I was an NFL GM, that would matter to me. I'm just going to be honest. If I was an NFL GM, which I'm not, never was going to be one, but if I was an NFL GM and I had to pick between a kid, I didn't have anything else to pick between but competitive character, he's definitely got that. Okay. And he knows, and the NFL will get him right. You gotta be smart taking hits because the NFL is a longer season. And you got to take care of your body. And he's not the biggest guy. He's like $190 right now. He's been a little bit bigger before, but he's not ever going to get above 210, probably, I imagine, in the NFL, even when he gets older. He'll always take care of his body. He's done a great job with that in the last couple of years. And, that's just who he is. He's got to be careful about taking hits. But so does Kyler Murray. I mean, any quarterback in the NFL has to be careful, and he'll learn that. And that's probably, if you had a knock on the guy going to the NFL, that's probably the one thing is like, hey, look, we appreciate you trying to run over linebackers and stuff, but you got to calm that stuff down in a 16-game season. But extremely talented. I don't think it's going to affect his draft status. I think he'll be a first-round quarterback. And while I'm on it, we'll talk about the NFL stuff later. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that. But look, before we even get on that, somebody was trying to tell me about mock drafts this morning. There are 3 first-round quarterbacks. There are 3. Okay? You got Matt Corral, the kid from Pitt, and Sam Howell from North Carolina. Those are the 3 first-round quarterbacks in the NFL, period. I don't want to hear anything about anybody else. Okay, those are the 3 guys that are first-round NFL quarterbacks. Anybody else that's taken, they're stretching. You are wasting a draft pick. So, and while we're on that, if Aiden Hutchinson is picked first by the Jacksonville Jaguars, like one of our favorite people think in the mock drafts, I quit. All right, so you better go get you a left tackle to protect your quarterback. So doesn't need to be a first-round pick after what happened the other day. All right, but Ole Miss and Baylor, if Matt Corral doesn't get hurt, does that affect the game? Probably. I think Ole Miss had field position and had some things that he probably could have taken advantage of a little bit better. You put in Luke Altmaier from his first real experience in a college game. He had a couple snaps here and there, but his first real experience in a big-time environment against a big-time opponent, that was, that's tough. Baylor completely dominated the defense line versus Ole Miss's offensive line. A lot of people didn't realize Jeremy James goes out before Matt Corral. Eli Acker struggled a little bit. Their interior D-line really pushed the pocket well. I think they had, 8 sacks at one point in time. There's no telling. I don't know what they ended up with. But here's the thing is Ole Miss's defense kept them in the game. Ole Miss's defense played well enough to win that game. And so when you look at the final score was 21-7, 14 of the 21 points came off of turnovers. Okay, so you had the pick six, the first one, which is obvious, and then he throws the pick and they get the ball like the 20. But Baylor really only drove the ball one time down the field and scored, and Ole Miss with Luke threw the fade, I think, to Braylon and scored their touchdown. But Ole Miss's defense played unbelievable, like just as well as Baylor's did. Just they didn't get the turnovers or the sacks. They did get some negative plays and put them in behind the chains. Baylor hurt themselves with some penalties offensively, but what I was counting on is if Matt Corral plays that game, I still think Ole Miss wins the game. Would have been tougher, but I did not see that kind of domination up front by the Baylor defensive line. That probably, if anything, surprised me. That did. I did see Ole Miss's defense playing that well against Baylor's offense. I just didn't see Baylor's defense playing that well against Ole Miss's offense. So, the story that we'll never know that I would have loved to seen. And Aranda's a smart guy. He talked about it late, right before kickoff, a day or two before kickoff, was if Matt Corral plays and they're able to get some tempo going, how much that affected the defensive line. But when Luke got in the game and they weren't able to really go tempo and they had to slow things down, that was, they were basically huddling almost every play. So they were not, but the same tempo of a huddle. So that probably affected the game. And now, Ole Miss will have to hit the free agency market. They're going to have a lot of players and a lot of coaches will come and go. Some are out there, some aren't yet. A lot of players, a lot of coaches will come and go over the next few months. Ole Miss does have an advantage that they don't start classes here for another couple of weeks, and so they're going to be able to get some guys in spring, I'm sure. And they only signed 16, I believe, 16, 17, so they have plenty of spots left. And so you're going to see a whole new look to the Rebels next fall, but it's just like free agency, like the Saints are going to have to do after this year. They're already $70 million over the cap. They're going to have to reset, and it's going to be a different looking team and coaches too. And so it's going to be a really big offseason for the Rebels to decide if they're going to be where they're going to be next year. The schedule starts out well for them to begin the season. The ending is very difficult. So what happens between now and August 1st is going to be probably determine what the year looks like. It can be as good as it can get. It can be as bad as it can get. It just really depends. Probably the biggest offseason, I would say not probably. I think this is the biggest offseason for Lane Kiffin in his career, determining how this is going to end up for him here at Ole Miss. All right, moving on to the playoff games. We'll start with it in the order. Alabama and Cincinnati. Kind of went like I thought it was going to be, but actually I will give Cincinnati. Actually, they kept it a little bit closer than I thought they would. Alabama physically dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides, but Cincinnati did get some pressure on the quarterback, and it wasn't because they had Alabama couldn't pick up a twist, which blew my mind. Like Alabama looked like the Alabama going into what you thought was like that was who they were the last 3 or 4 games, to where everybody thought Georgia's going to kill them, and they showed up in the SEC championship game and looked like what Alabama used to look like, and then they kind of went back a little bit. They were able to Cincinnati was able to get pressure on the quarterback and really force Bryce out of the pocket. Like they didn't really sack him a lot, and they didn't really get after him to where it affected things, but it affected the timing and guys getting open. And I thought that Cincinnati did a great job on the back end with scramble rules and things like that, really covering the guys up. Cincinnati's game plan, it looked like to me coming in the game, is they were not going to let Williams beat them. One was not going to beat them, and they did everything. They took him out of the game. Okay, they had him bracketed. They put their best corner on him. They did everything they could to keep him from beating them. And so Alabama looked like they realized that pretty early, and just said okay. And so they basically averaged like 7 or 8 yards a carry and just physically ran right at them and dominated the game, and they couldn't stop them. When Alabama, I'd say Alabama stopped themselves. They could have literally just ran Brian Robinson 1,000 times. Now they probably said, okay, we can win. And they started, he would basically get them down the field and they try to throw a little bit and then get behind the chains, force some field goals, things like that, missed field goal. But they just did enough to win. They still covered. They still beat them by 21 points. I really thought it was probably going to be a 30 to 35 point game instead of 21. But Cincinnati just couldn't match up physically, and they just couldn't. I still don't think they were number 4 team in the country, but they got there, so it is what it is. Alabama kind of got a pass to get into the championship game with that game. Just looked like it was they were at practice. It was a Tuesday practice for them. They just lined up and went out there and ran at people. And we'll see what happens this next week, which we'll talk about in a second. Moving on to the Georgia-Michigan game, wow, this one I didn't expect. I thought that after what the Georgia that showed up to the SEC championship game, I don't know what they got rid of those guys. Complete domination just about in every facet of the game. And I want Michigan fans to know this. Don't feel bad. That's what Georgia did to the other 12 weeks. Okay, that was what Georgia. That looked like the Georgia-Kentucky game. That looked like the Georgia-Florida game. That's what Georgia did to every SEC team they played, with the exception of Alabama. That's what happened in that game. Complete domination up front. Couldn't protect. Couldn't move them up front. And this wasn't a bad offensive line. Now they won the Michigan offensive line won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line unit in the country. Fans need to know that. They're good. And Georgia it was bad. I mean, they completely and utterly dominated the game on both sides of the ball. And look, Aiden Hutchinson, good player. High motor guy, good player. Was he the second best player? He finished second in the Heisman Trophy. Was non-existent and was getting murdered up front. He had no chance. And to say that guy's going to be the first pick in the draft, come on now. I don't see it. But, I mean, he's a great motor guy. Somebody's going to take him. He'll play. But he's not – I mean, he wouldn't be in the top 25 guys, edge rushers in the NFL. Now, if you want to talk about opt-outs, we can talk about an opt-out. All right. Will Anderson, if Will Anderson would come out in the draft right now, I think he'd be the number 1 pick. And he's got another year. Good luck to you. Good luck. Somebody's going to try to get in that kid's ear. And the good thing he's at Alabama and Nick will talk to him. But I haven't seen a situation like this since Jadeveon Clowney. When Clowney was a sophomore, everybody knew that he was going to be the number 1 pick in the draft the next year. Okay, he had a whole other year at South Carolina. You got the same thing with Will Anderson at Alabama. Okay, and I haven't seen it since. Well, that's been, 8-9 years ago now? So I think Will Anderson's the number 1 pick in the draft for 2 years from now, whatever. It's kind of like Trevor Lawrence. I guess we thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be a number 1 pick for a while, but no brainer. And he'll have to come back and play another year. You wait, somebody's going to get in his ear and try to get him to opt out for this year. But he won't, because he's a baller and he's a competitor for that. But just really impressed with what Georgia did really everywhere. Stetson Bennett came out and threw the ball. They had matchups. Tight ends dominated. Running backs, offensive line, defensive line. They literally dominated the game and played like they've been playing. Michigan never had a chance at all in the game. At least you could say Cincinnati against Alabama, when the muff punt happened, if Cincinnati would have recovered that ball, would have made it interesting for a little while. Do I think they would have won the game? No. But there was no chance of life at all in this game. They did not score a touchdown until they pulled everybody out of the game, which sets up arguably the matchup that nobody's going to know how to act next week, which is the Alabama-Georgia National Championship game next Monday night in Indianapolis. I think it's hilarious that now they got to travel to Indianapolis to play. They could let's line it up and play in Atlanta again, save some travel. So Alabama and Georgia is probably one of the most interesting matchups in a long time. And I really don't know which way to go with this one. I'll make a pick at the end of this, but, it's so eerily similar. I'm sure we'll hear every storyline there is in the next, 10 days. We've already done this for a week, so I don't know if the media is just going to rinse and repeat what they did, for a week, a month ago, or are they going to come out with some new storylines. But here was the interesting thing for me I thought about over the weekend is when Nick Saban when he came to Alabama, his first year, he went 6-6 and lost to Louisiana Monroe, by the way, but went 6-6. And when he came to Alabama, there was a dominant program in the SEC called the Florida Gators, and they had a head coach named Urban Meyer, and they were kind of dominating the SEC. All right. And in year 2, in 2008, Nick Saban goes undefeated in the regular season. I don't know if it was 11 or 12 games, but goes undefeated in the regular season. And then they had to play, in 2008, play Florida, the dominant Florida, in the SEC championship game, and got beat. Okay. They got beat. And then in year 3, in 2009, they go undefeated again and had to play the Florida Gators again. Okay. So they had to play them again. So it's year 3, had to play them again. And they finally beat them. They beat Florida. And then once they beat Florida in 2009, Florida and Alabama were like two ships passing in the night. Okay, Alabama became who Alabama is today. And I want everybody to think about this. Since that 2009 game, Alabama has only, to my recollection, only played in 2 or 3 games that wasn't for the national title. Basically, they played 2010. They had to play in the Citrus Bowl. 2013, they won it in 11, 12. 2013, played in the Sugar Bowl, but lost the kick 6 game. That was when Florida State won it. And then went on a run. And then I think last year, 2 years ago, 19 or whatever, 3 years ago, they played in the Citrus Bowl again in like 18, 19, whatever it was. And when LSU won it. And they've been on their run ever since that day. Well, look at Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart gets to Georgia. They go 7-5 the first year. In year 2, the man's Nick Saban now. So he has to go play Nick in the national championship game and had him beat and lost on the Devontae Smith and Tua fade. Okay. And then has lost to him in the SEC championship game twice, lost to him in 2020 regular season. And so where Nick Saban's arch nemesis when he came to the SEC was Urban Meyer at Florida, and he had to overcome that dragon. Now Kirby's is his mentor, Nick Saban, and he's got to overcome it. Okay, and he's been close every time. The difference was, I think he's got the team now to do it. I think he's more dominant. I think he's got matchups that he can win. I think that Georgia wins this game. I think this is the time. I think Georgia wins it. I think one, it's hard to beat a team twice. Okay, and the other thing is Alabama had the perfect game plan against Georgia. They caught Georgia. Georgia didn't look like Georgia. They didn't, this effort-wise. I know that sounds crazy, but effort-wise up front, defensively, they were, they were almost like they were two-gapping all the way across the front. There was no penetration. They never won a pass rush battle. They never really got after the quarterback, and they just let him sit back there and pick him apart. Well, he is the Heisman Trophy winner. Okay, if you let him sit back there and pick you apart, he's going to do that. I think they look better on the back end against Michigan. They have plenty of time to get those things fixed. And you got to get over right now. This is the mental hurdle. Okay. This is Georgia's Roger Bannister moment. Okay. And if you don't know who Roger Bannister is, he was the first person to ever run the 4-minute mile. People thought it was impossible, that you could never run. They thought, there were scientists that said the human would die. They could not physically run a 4-minute mile. Could never be done ever before. And so finally, I don't even know what year it was. I probably should have looked it up. That just came off the top of my head. But in the 50s, I think, he goes and runs a 4-minute mile. Well, like in the next year, there was tens of people that run for. Once one person broke it, tens of people knew it was possible, and they were able to do it. And this is Georgia's Roger Bannister moment. They have to go in there and they have to win. And I think if they win, I think Georgia takes off. They're set up to take off. They have the players. They have the resources. They have the coaches. I think this is their defining moment. I think it's time. They got the ability. They can do it. I think they know they can do it. From the Alabama standpoint, they got Alabama's best shot. Okay, and Alabama beat them, but Georgia didn't. Georgia beat themselves a little bit too. They moved the football. It wasn't like Georgia didn't move the football in the SEC championship game. They turned the ball over. They turned it over on downs, and Alabama was giving their best shot, and it was throwing the football. I think Georgia's ready. I think now's the time. I think Georgia gets after them. I just don't think Alabama can do it twice. I'll be the guy. It's going to be interesting to see, even though Nick is going to use that they're underdogs again to his players, they'll be motivated, ready to go. they're underdogs again, even after they beat the brakes off a month ago. And then Kirby's going to use it. Well, they beat us underdogs, so both coaches are going to motivate their kids that they're underdogs and they can't win. So somebody's got to give. But I think it's the time. I think now's the time for that to happen. We'll be very interested to see a lot of, if you're a football, I think a lot of fans are tired of the SEC versus the SEC thing. But, I mean, it's a playoff now. You had your chance. Big Ten failed. I guess you can call Cincinnati Group of Five, but they're fisting to be a Big 12 team. Big Ten failed, but, everybody's had their shot, but we end up here we are with Alabama and Georgia. And I think if anybody's being honest with yourself, regardless what fan of that you are, these are the two best teams this year. The only one that I could have made an argument with was I still think Ohio State is in that conversation when they're healthy and they're going. But besides those three fan bases, there's really not an argument. And then, Ohio State, you can't be really mad because they lost to Michigan and they lost two to Oregon and Michigan. But I still think as a team on any given day, like if this was the NFL and you got 16 shots at it in the playoffs, Ohio State would have a shot. They are a talented team. But at the end of the day, these two teams, they got through the gauntlet, and they're probably the two best teams out there, again, with the argument of Ohio State. So I'm going with Georgia winning the game. I know it's like 2.5 or 3. I'm just going with Georgia to win the game, money line, I guess. But I do think it'll be a good game. I do think this is the time. This is the Roger Banneker moment. They got to come with it. This weekend and next week, early next week, we are going to be at the AFCA Football Convention. We'll be at the booth at QwikQ. Our booth will be right next to Quick Cut. So coaches, come by and see us. It'll be myself, Clay Carter, and Raquel will be there as well at the convention. So come by and see us. Give us a shout at our QwikQ booth. Check out our product. We got a ton of teams swapping over this month. It's been a busy couple of weeks here. But come check us out. Make your recruiting system and more efficient and better. We have our QwikQ product is state of the art, cutting edge, never been done before in recruiting, and it's really turning some eyes and ears in the market. And we'd love to see you and talk to you. We'll be there through Tuesday morning, and then we're getting out of there as well. And then I don't know when we're going to tape. We'll figure out time to tape next week, but we'll be moving on and look forward to what's coming up for the spring and recruiting and all that good stuff. But until next time, take care.